Salvete, this is Magister Jacobus from Learn Latin. And in this lesson, we are going to read a marble plaque with a funerary inscription. And I selected this one because it's fairly easy to read. It's a great first Roman inscription to read if you're not familiar with abbreviations. So we're going to read this. I'm going to explain a little bit of the story of this plaque. I'm going to break down the grammar and explain also the structure of this, the general structure that you can expect to find in this kind of plaques. So you will see the next plaque you want to read will be easier to read once you have all this information. So this plaque right here I found, as you can see, in the website of the Metropolitan Museum. It contains a brief description, the dating, some interesting information about dimensions, and where you can find it actually in the museum. So if you are from New York, or if you can travel to New York, it would be a very nice thing to learn to read this and then go see the real thing there. There are many more inscriptions, more plaques here that in future lessons I will break down. And let's read just briefly what it says here. This is a Latin inscription. It comes from a columbarium, that is a communal chamber tomb. And let's read the translation, so reading the Latin becomes easier actually. To the spirits of the dead, for Caius Porcius Dionysius, who lived 8 years, 10 months, and 13 days. Caius Porcius Dionysius implied this for the sweetest of sons. What is a columbarium? I wanted to show you one, just so you have an idea a rough idea where this comes from. And there is a very famous columbarium in Rome. There are many actually, but this one is fairly famous. This is from, Vigna Codini. And as you can see, this is a columbarium. That is a communal place for tombs. So each of these niches here could contain a tomb. You can see the plaques here. All these are plaques. So the plaque that we are going to read probably comes from a columbarium of this kind. It was extracted from here, put in a museum, or someone sold it. Who knows? I just want to show you that. So I have here the plaque, and the first thing I wanted to explain is some of the abbreviations, because that's the most difficult aspect of reading inscriptions in general. In the first line, you see a D and an M. This D here means this, and this M means manibus. So this is the only thing that you sort of have to memorize, that if you don't know, you cannot just guess. You have to know what this is, what this stands for, because it's an abbreviation. And this is a dative. It's in the dative case. So you have to translate with something as to, and this is an archaic spelling, let's say, because it's the same as saying days. Okay, this is also the dative of, let me just write that here, dative, plural actually, dative plural, of the word deus. So you see, you just take the ending and you form the dative plural here. This is just an archaic spelling, and actually you can also find it contracted like this, just with a long E. To the gods, which you could also translate that spirits, just as in the website did, and you will see why. And this manibus is also a dative. It derives from, or it's the dative plural of the word manes. Now this manes is precisely the ancient domestic spirit of the dead in ancient Roman tradition. That is, in the domestic cult, the ancient Romans used to pray and sacrifice to these manes here. This is the nominative form. To these manes that were the family ancestors, so to speak, the spirit of the ancestors. So this eventually became just simply the spirit of the dead. Okay, so the idea of writing this dedication or this addressing at the beginning of the plaque is a way of saying or calling the attention of these manes and say, take care of the person that just died, or this is said to you so you can guide them in the underworld or something like that, something along those lines, to the spirit or to the gods of the dead. That's how I would translate. And that's what this DM here stands for. And again, it's a dative because it's trying to address these people, or it's dedicated to the spirit of the dead in a sense. And again, it's just the idea that maybe these spirits can guide or receive the spirit of the person that just died. Now we find in the next line here the real dedication, that is, who died actually, who is this plaque dedicated to? And that's Caio. You see here a very common abbreviation for common names, the K, the C here, and this is simply Caio. By the way, the C and the G in ancient Rome were interchangeable in a sense, so you can pronounce it Gaio or Caio, but the letter that you find in inscriptions is the C, the K, Caio. Then we have Porcio, Dionysio, with the Y here, right? So this is the three Roman names essentially. So you have, let me just write that here, Caio, Porcio, Dionisio, and this is the praenomen. That is the name that comes before the proper name, nomen, and then the cognomen. Right, this is just the three names that every patrician Roman had. And this is also a dative, by the way. This is also in the dative case, because this is the person, the kid who died, and to whom the plaque is dedicated. So that's where you find this in the dative, and that's going to be very common in all the funerary inscriptions that you may read, because it's going to be dedicated to the person who died. And that dedication, just as this above, by the way, is going to be always in the dative case. That's why you find the endings here, even Porcio Dionisio, that is the singular masculine ending of the second declension, right? Then you find the verb vixit, and this vixit is the perfect of the verb vivere in the third person singular. That is, this person here, vixit, this Porcius Dionysius, the kid, maybe you could think that is implied personal pronoun, like he, maybe you could think, you could imagine the personal pronoun is implied here in the sense that he's the one who vixit, he's the one who lived, and that's actually the translation, lived. He lived, vixit. And by the way, the present tense would simply be vivid, right? So this is the present tense. And the perfect tense, the past tense, is vixit. He lived, and then you have this sort of abbreviation of year, month, and days. That is the lifespan, how long he lived. And it's probably the most complicated part of the plaque, because there are some abbreviations here. The first one is this an. This is abbreviated. And this an is an abbreviation for annis. That is, how many years? How many years? Then you have the number 8. You see, this is the Roman way of expressing the number 8. Then you have simply an M here, and this M is the most abbreviated part of the lifespan because this is mensibus. Let me just write that here. Mensibus. This is the months. So all this part is omitted because you only have the initial of the word mensibus. And then you have another number, 10. This is just the Roman numeral for 10. 8 years, 10 months. And you have complete, without abbreviation, diebus. Diebus. Days. How many days? And you have 13 here. So if you don't know the Roman numerals, that's another topic. But here, these are simply just the Roman way of expressing the numbers, 8, 10, 13. Now, these words here, annis, mensibus, diebus, what's the case here? Maybe you can see that from the endings already, but the case is an ablative. And the ablative usually is used to say that when something happens. So the common way of using the ablative with time is the ablative of time when. But in this case, that's not what's the purpose here. This is an ablative of extension of time, which is kind of weird, actually, because if you have studied, for example, my Latin course, or Familia Romana, or if you in general know Latin, you know that usually the case we use for the extension of time is not the ablative, it's actually the accusative. That's the typical case we use to express extension, that is like duration, a span of time. But here we find the ablative, and let me tell you, in imperial inscriptions, that is, inscriptions like this one, that date from, let's say, the 1st to the 2nd century AD, it's quite common. It would be correct to find also the accusative. Like if you found, instead of the ablative, you could have found something like annos, menses, dies, and all this would be like in the accusative. That would be correct too. And if you're curious, as I was when I first found out about this ablative of extension of time, I can tell you that I noticed that Cicero, who lived in the 1st century BC, that is in the Republican era, in the Roman Republic, he uses the accusative of extension of time. So he uses this case here to express duration. And Seneca, who lived in this imperial period here, he sometimes uses the ablative of extension of time. So it's possible that using the ablative or the accusative to express duration or extension of time depends actually in which period you actually wrote. And since this plaque is from the imperial times, makes sense that just like Seneca, the person writing this inscription used the ablative for the span of time. So that's, if you were curious about that, that's the reason. Otherwise, you can simply see the ablative here and just remember that that's how it's going to be expressed. And by the way, I tell you this because if you read, let me just cancel here. If you read this inscription, you can see that the endings are actually omitted here for annus, annis, and mensibus. You only know the case because of the word diebus. But if these two were like omitted, abbreviated, well, we could just say it's ablative, it's accusative. We don't know because we cannot see the endings. But here we can see the endings, so we know that all this is in the ablative. And then, moving on, we have another C, another K, that also stands for Caius, Porcius, Dionysius. So as you can see, it's the same name as above, but this time, because of the ending, us, Caius, Porcius, Dionysius, it's in the nominative. All this is in the nominative case. Because that's the subject, actually, of the entire plaque. And why is the same name? Because he's the father. This Caius Porcius Dionysius is the father of this kid who died. So you see, this kid was only 8 years, 10 months, and 13 days when he died. And the person dedicating this inscription, the person who bought and paid for this plaque, was the father, and the son had the same name as the father. They were both called Caius Porcius Dionysius. But the father is the subject of the sentence, of the whole plaque, and the verb we're going to find at the end. So let's just move on to the next line. Filio dulcissimo. Filio, this is a word, and then there is this other word here, filio dulcissimo. Now, this is also in the dative, by the way. That's why you find filio with the O here, typical of the, well, the one you use for the dative, singular, masculine, second declension, just like Caius. And that's not a coincidence, because this filio dulcissimo refers to Caio Porcio Dionisio. They are both in the dative. All these two lines are in the dative. It's just like postponed in a sense, this filio dulcissimo. And this filio, it's obviously just the dative of filius, which means son. And this dulcissimo is the dative of the superlative of the adjective dulcis, dulcis dulce. And this is a third declension adjective, by the way. So you have two forms, one for the feminine and masculine, and one for the neuter. But here we don't care about that, because in the superlative, the form goes back or falls back again to the first and second declension. So dulcissimus, dulcissima, dulcissimum. You see, this is the form of the superlative, for all the superlatives in Latin, by the way. First and second declension, us a That's why you see the dative masculine singular here, dulcissimo. Sweetest, that's the meaning. So if you read from the beginning, well, actually, let's go to the verb here. Fecit. This fecit refers to Caius Porcius Dionysius. And this fecit is the perfect or past tense of the verb facere, which means to make, to do. So the object of this verb fecit is implied. You could think that you could translate the implication as this, referring to the plaque. In Latin, hoc fecit. That is, he, this Porcius Dionysius, the father, the senior, made, fecit, implied this plaque, hoc. That's how you say this in Latin, hoc. That's the implied word here. You could even write it here, hoc. For Caio Porcio Dionisio, the sweetest son, who lived, again, the who is like implied, or he, but actually you could, the implication here above could be better thought as qui, like with a relative pronoun, who lived years 8, months 10, days 13. Okay, so this is the plaque. This is what the plaque says. And of course, here above, the dies manibus, dedication also, or addressing to the spirit of the dead. So as you can see, the structure is quite typical, because you will, in every Roman inscription, especially funerary inscription, you will have the person who dedicates, who bought, who paid for the plaque in the nominative, because that's going to be the subject. Then you will have something like fecit. This is very typical, that is made, and agreeing, obviously, with the nominative of the sentence. And then you're going to have the dative of the person who died, because that's the person that's going to be dedicated to or for, and that's going to be the person who died, in this case, the son of this Caius Porcius Dionysius, who was named after him, so they share the same name. That could be a little bit confusing if you're not aware of the cases here. And typically you're going to have the lifespan. Again, depending on the century, maybe you will find the ablative. Perhaps you could find the accusative. That would be fine too. And that's it. This is an excellent first funerary inscription to read because it contains very few abbreviations, just one here, another one here, this maribus, but this is like quite typical, and the rest is very clear and quite readable. So I hope you enjoyed this brief short lesson on Roman epigraphy. Epigraphy is the discipline that studies all these kind of inscriptions from ancient times. So I will continue to make more of these lessons. Let me know if you enjoyed this, if you found this helpful, if my explanation was clear, and if you liked it, let me know in the comments so I can continue to make more of this and I can help you read more and more Roman inscriptions so you can get closer to the material archaeological world of the ancient Romans. And if you want to learn Latin from scratch, remember I have a complete course starting from 0 to advanced reading in my website, learnlatin.io. And there you will find all my courses with a single monthly subscription. Thank you very much for joining me in this lesson.